Welcome to this week's episode of Tired and Thriving, a podcast recognizing just how tired and exhausted we all are while discussing ways to still thrive. I'm your host, Samantha Gray, and this week's guest is Melissa Graziano. Melissa is an animation director, animator, and storyboard artist, working everything in the field. She has worked on many fun shows like Rick and Morty, Little Demon, Tuca and Birdie, and more. You're also quite the instructor on Toon Boom Harmony and other art classes. Thank you for sharing time with me, Melissa.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Well, I always like to start off with what started your path into art and animation.
Sure. So, um, I knew from a really early age that I wanted to tell stories and make art at the same time. Like when I was really little, like in elementary school, I wanted to be an author illustrator. And then the last day of fourth grade, my mom took me and my best friend at the time to go see The Lion King. And that was it. Like when I came out of that theater, I'm like, oh wait, I can make that. Like I can make money drawing Simba all day. I want that job. so but basically from there on, I was pretty set on wanting to do animation, at least in some capacity. And then when got to high school, I definitively decided, like, okay, this is what I want to do. Like, animation is the culmination of all other art forms, because at the time I was doing a lot of writing, I was doing photography, I was experimenting with a musician as well. I come from a family of musicians.
Oh,
So
wow.
doing all of these different things like drawing and sculpting and painting and everything, I'm like, at some point I'm going to have to decide on one of these medium, and I don't really want to. So then I realized, like, yeah, like I said, animation is the culmination of all other media. Like, you can dance in animation, you can create music in animation, you can do everything. So then I'm like, all right, this is definitely what I want to do. I want to use the medium of animation as to tell stories and um, to make interesting visuals and to do things that you can't do normally. Like, you can't. There's just things that animation can do that you can't do any other way. And that really took me. So yeah, that's how I ended up following
Figuring it
that
out.
path.
Yeah. And so you figured that out at the end of high school, you said?
Towards the beginning, I was
Oh, towards the
definitively
beginning.
like, this is
Oh,
definitely,
wow.
yeah. And I was, oddly enough, so if the Lion King showed me that an animator is a potential career path, it was actually A Bug's Life, of all weird underrated movies, that when I realized, like, oh wait, this is everything. Like, you can do everything in in animation. And so that's what got me, like, the blinders on.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is definitely what I want to do. And I was very, very lucky in that I've always had extremely supportive teachers and
Mhm.
family, who, especially teachers who, one of my teachers, when I told her that I wanted to go into animation, she's like, I have no idea what that means, but if you tell me what you need, I will help you get it. And so she helped me get into, like, an adult only drawing class. And she knew the instructor, and she's like, this is one of my students. She's only, I think it was like 13, 14 at the time. And she's like, she's very serious.
Wow.
She wants to learn how to draw. And I think at that point I didn't have either enough art classes or any art classes. And so just having that kind of support was really, really helpful. And I got that pretty much all the way through college, where in college, I knew I wanted to do animation, but I either couldn't get into the colleges that I wanted to get into, or I could not afford the ones I got into. So
Yeah.
I went to a smaller uh, university in Connecticut, not UConn, but Central Connecticut State University, which had
Mm.
at the time no film, no animation. It actually did have one, like, film. I guess you could call it film theory class. It's like film
Mm.
101 type of class, but it was like in the communications department, and they didn't really, like, no one else was really serious about becoming a filmmaker
Yeah.
at that point. So anyway, but my advisor at college knew I wanted to do animation, and he knew that my university had a relationship with a university in England. So I was at that university on a scholarship as part of the honors program. So as long as I kept a certain GPA, I basically was on a free ride. So I went kicking and screaming, but I went, and I was able to go to England for a year. And I just learned animation that whole year, and then I came back and I finished, and I was like, okay, I have some animation under my belt, but and I was also taking other classes. So I, like, during the summers I would take classes at RISD and California,
Wow.
no, sorry, Columbia College Chicago, and just like piecing together my education. And this is like early 2000s.
Yeah.
Um, and so eventually uh, so when I graduated in 2006, I'm like, I can't get a job with this. Like, I have enough
Mm.
knowledge to be dangerous, but not enough to be taken seriously. So I ended up going to UCLA for graduate school. And
Oh
that's
wow.
so then I moved to LA. That was in 2006 as
Hmm.
a fresh faced 21/20, just turning 22-year old. Um, and and then yeah, so from there I was able to meet more people actually in the industry, and to, get the knowledge that I needed to actually get a job, um,
Yeah.
and all of that, make the connections that I needed to actually, find a community. I think that was the big thing for me, is like finding the animation community, which I did not have. I had a little bit when I was in England because I was surrounded by other animation students, but that was like,
Yeah.
maybe 15 people, versus when I went to UCLA, and it was, even though our class was pretty small, it's like, well, at least I got to meet people working in the industry, and people who are, yeah, it was just that finding that community was so, so important, especially since I had ridiculous amount of culture shock moving to LA. Like, I had more culture
Mm-hmm.
shock moving to LA than I did living in England for a year, because I'm from Connecticut. So culturally,
Yeah.
Connecticut is almost closer to England than it is to LA,
Yeah. It's
to
like
California.
not only culturally, but like weather-wise too.
Yeah, that's also true. It took like two straight years. The whole 2 years, first 2 years I was here, I would wake up every morning and look out the window and go, "Oh, it's nice again today. This is great." 2 years, and then eventually I got
Amazing.
used to it.
I think it's interesting. Like, I really like your story because I feel that, well, there have been guests that also always knew that they wanted to do art, um, be creative. But I think you're one of the first people, if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but I think you're one of the first people that saw animation, understood that that's what you really wanted to do, and then really went for it rather than it happenstance
Mhm.
kinda, like, falling into your lap or, being like, "Oh, I guess this is, like, something I, um"
Could do.
like yeah, 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 exactly. Like, you really
Mhm.
focused, and you really figured out what steps you wanted to do to, like, get to that point.
Yeah.
Um
And I realize how rare and weird that is. Like, most people don't know at, like, 8, 9, 10, 12, 18,
Yeah,
40 what they
yeah,
want to do with the rest of their lives. And it was just something that felt very and I also tried it out a little bit in high school, where I was like, I'm going to take this summer class and see if I can sustain this. And
yeah.
I just went full throttle, and I really loved it. I'm like, okay, this is definitely what I want to do. All right, let's do this.
Yeah, I think
So,
also actually, I will say that as well as your drive, you did get help really early on. I think that's also like a key difference
yes,
too. That was it
100%.
your advisor or your teacher who
Yeah, so I come from a family of teachers. I think that's also kind of important to mention as well. So
mm,
I've had a lot of support just generally from my family, and my my art teachers in particular. Um, from I would say from middle school through high school, and then even in college, they were very much like, because I've heard of other stories of other art teachers belittling their students if they're drawing cartoons. You're like, oh, that's not real art. And mine were
yeah.
not like that at all. They were
Oh my
extremely
gosh.
supportive, but I think they were supportive because they could see how hard I worked. Like, I would take projects that they would assign and sort of skew it so that it would help me, you know, develop a skill that I knew I would need as an animator.
Mhm.
And they were okay with that because I was working hard, you know, and I was serious about it. Um, and I think for them, again, because they were like, we don't know what it entails to like learn how to do animation, but so they didn't have any animation classes or anything, but I did the research and I watched all of the, you know, in those days it was basically you had, you know, Frank and Ollie's book, The Illusion of Life, and the behind the scenes sort of specials that Disney would put on every time they came out with a new feature. And so I
Mm.
would like watch those over and over and over again and try to figure out, okay, you know, what do I need to do to get to where I need to be so that when I grow up, I can actually do this for a living.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing I wanted to mention too is this is a very weird happenstancy type thing, but again, it kind of shows the support that I had. My mom found it in a newspaper article that there was like some random home show someplace in probably in Hartford or something. And
Mhm.
at that home show, they were advertising a woman who had been a Disney animator.
Oh,
And
wow.
she was like, "Oh, we have like," so she like, "We have to go." And so we went, and I met her, and I have no idea what her name is. So whoever's listening out there, if you know, if you are that person, thank you so much. But I talked with her for I don't even know how long, and she gave me a list of like, here's the resources that you need. Here's what you need to do. You need to be able to draw every day. You have to carry around a sketchbook, which I did religiously for years and years.
Mm.
So that was another point of access. Again, this is all pretty much pre-internet for the most part.
Yeah. Mhm.
So having that point of access where it was just a random person at a again, like random home show. Do they even have those anymore? I don't know. But and she was doing draw. So I know that she worked on the Little Mermaid because I remember she was doing like aerial drawings. And
Wow.
so just being able to talk with her and know that like this is a viable career. This is something that I can do and here's how to do it. I just have to put in the work. That was really huge for me. And like I said,
Yeah.
I wish I could remember who it was. I have that
Oh.
drawing someplace, probably in my parents' house. I'll have to see if she signed it. But but yeah, just having that access and having the support, I think it was a huge, huge difference. And also like my mom, she so she when I was growing up, she was a general manager at McDonald's, and now she's a regional
Mm.
manager. But at the time, she was like, "I'm working my butt off at McDonald's, so you don't have to. So you better." So
Aw.
she was always very supportive in me and my siblings, and like making sure we could achieve the things that we wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
And the flip side of that was like my dad wasn't like he was more on the skeptical side.
Mm.
So he one day because he was a jazz musician at a time where jazz was dying, and so he didn't want his kids to become starving artists. And
Yeah.
so he was like, places like Disney, they only take the best. So like maybe you should think about doing something else. I'm like, what's preventing me from being the best?
Yeah.
And so I had the pull and the push, right? I had the pull from my mom and the push from my dad. So um, that that helped too, I think.
Yeah. That's amazing. Um, oh. Oh, well, okay. So you started so early, was there, and I feel like this is a bit hard, or I guess this is like a new topic I'm bringing up, which is
Mhm.
especially because you dedicated yourself so early. Do you feel like there was ever any burnout when, especially maybe like in your early 20s, that you experienced, or?
Not I don't think I experienced burnout until I became a director. So when my
Oh.
first couple, yeah, so and it was because I was just pulling a ridiculous number of hours. So I've been retake director twice on two different projects,
Mhm.
and I was just doing so many hours. I was for the last project I worked on, it was up to 84 hours a week. which I
Oh
do not
gosh.
recommend at all. But there was no supervising director on that project. I was the only director on the project. And so
Mm,
it was like everything had to go through me. And so, so I had to take at least, there was a 6 month stint on that project. And then I had to take the entire following month off where I went back
damn.
to my parents' place in Connecticut and was like, don't talk to me. I'm gonna go sit in the woods for a couple of weeks. So that was like the pretty much only time I have had times of like after I finished UCLA. This wasn't
Mhm.
so much a burnout; it was more a sort of sense of feeling like lost or drifting.
Mm,
Um,
mhm.
where after I finished UCLA, I had a really hard time breaking into the industry. So I was doing a lot of storyboard tests because I was trying to break in as a storyboard artist. A lot of board tests. I was doing a lot of freelance. So I was taking on projects where I was doing like the entire animated, whatever it is, a film or short or educational video or whatever. But in between those projects, if I didn't have anything to sort of give me my day structure, I basically wasn't doing anything. And so that was like almost like opposite of burnout, right? It was this sense of like, well, I worked really hard and I thought I had everything I needed to do, but I'm still not getting to where I want to be. And um, it, I don't know if I guess you could say there were definitely times where I had situational depression. I got addicted to World of Warcraft at that time because
Oh my
I was
gosh.
like I spent the mornings looking for jobs and then there's only a certain number of places that you could look. And so the rest of my day was just playing video games because I didn't know what else to do. So that was not great. So yeah, during that downtime before I actually broke in, definitely burnout. Although there was also a point after I did start working in the industry, maybe about a year after I finally did break in, where there was a little bit of a um, let me think. It was like maybe the first year and a half where because I had spent so long before that scrambling for work and trying to get, to get to where I wanted to be, I took on way too much. So there were
Mm,
2 months in, I think 2016, 2017, two separate months where I worked every single day. At least, you know, I want to say at least 8 hours a day. And part of that was I had a full-time storyboarding job at Warner Brothers. I was teaching twice a week at Loyola Marymount. Um, I was teaching on the weekends
oh my
through the guild, and I almost took on freelance work. And my husband at the time, now ex, was like, "You need to stop. It's okay to say no. You don't have to do all of these things." And I'm like, I don't like, but I have it now. I have it now. I want to do all of the things because I have it.
yeah.
But yeah, by the time it got to like the maybe 25th day, I was really so I'm like, I don't do that anymore. I've since learned like if I'm teaching, then I don't want then I'm not going to work full time. If I'm working full time, I'm not going to teach it. So I kind of go back and forth between those two things just so I don't burn myself out because I know that I
Yeah.
can and I will given the chance. And I'm getting too old for that shit,
Yeah.
so to speak. Um, so yeah, trying to take risks.
Yeah. Well, speaking of like taking rests, what do you do, or even when you were, being lost, was there anything you did to, or were you even aware of how to center yourself or kind of just be like, I, you know, I guess like to get out of that headspace? Was there anything you did
Mhm.
when you were younger? Or like, how do you handle
Sure.
that then versus now?
Yeah, well, I didn't back then at all, and I didn't know how. And part of it too was I so when I was 35, I was diagnosed with ADHD,
Mm,
and I didn't have any real issues before that, other than that not knowing what to do during the downtime. Because during all of my school years, I always had the structure that I
yeah.
needed to succeed. And I also
Mhm.
had a lot of support. So I had the structure and the support that I needed to be able to focus and do the things I needed to get done. Not to say that I wasn't a horrible procrastinator, because I 100% am. Although I'm a little bit better now, but not by much. But it was, once I had that understanding, and I did a bunch of research and I spoke to professionals and I spoke to other people who, with ADHD. Once I learned how to create that structure for myself, and once I understood that that was the thing that was making me crazy, that that prevented me from being able to move forward, um, under my own steam, rather than having, somebody else or something else tell me what to do,
Yeah.
it became easier. So now I try to, like, I put everything in my schedule. Like, I have a Google Calendar, and even if it's just a simple task, I schedule it, because if it's not in the calendar, it's not going to happen. So yeah, so creating those external structures for myself has become something that is extremely helpful. They don't always work. I'm
Mm.
not 100% perfect at it. The number of times I've taken like a task and been like, I don't feel like doing that today. I'll just move it till tomorrow. Um,
Yeah.
because sometimes
Mhm.
that happens, but allowing myself the flexibility to, and like the giving myself the grace to not be perfect about that kind of thing, but at least it's there. At
Mm.
least the structure is there. So I feel like, okay, I can get XYZ done in this amount of time because
Yeah.
I've scheduled it out, because I've created the structure for myself. So giving myself deadlines, even if they seem arbitrary, it's like, I have to get this done by Friday. I have to do this by Monday. I have to do this by 5 o'clock today, or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, that all helps a lot. And it also helps my brain, focus on that thing. Like, okay, this thing is now urgent, so I have to concentrate on it because I have a deadline for this, rather than like, yeah, I have this like 50 things to do. I'll get to them eventually. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great to know for organization and, creating that routine for yourself.
Hmm.
Okay, so then with burnout though,
Hmm.
what do you do for yourself to kind of
All
get
right.
back on track or
Um, well, if I'm feeling burnt out, then I know that I need rest. And so that's
Mhm.
the number one priority. And so if I have certain things that I know have to get done by a certain time, the whole like business before pleasure. So I like try to get um, excuse me, those done first, just so I'm like, okay, I don't have to think about these anymore.
Yeah.
And then once I hit a time where I can rest, then I actually schedule the rest too. So whether
Mm.
that's a full day or a weekend or a few days or whatever. And usually when that comes up, if it's just me and me time, then a lot of times I'll play video games. I'll do some reading. I have like, well, can't see them all. I have a lot of books, so plenty to read. But usually, I don't. It's weird because I don't feel like I've actually gotten me time unless there's like something specific, like again, particularly a video game, and I've gone like right
Mhm.
now. I just finished Horizon Zero Dawn,
Oh,
so now
nice.
I need another one. I haven't done the DLC yet, and I know like
Mhm.
the second one is going to be available on Steam pretty soon, so then I'll have something new. But like, I feel like I've not rested unless I've had a full day that I can just play video games in my
Mm.
pajamas. That's
Yeah.
my rest. But also
Do you
like,
have to sorry, do you have
no,
to
sorry.
put that into your schedule as well? Is that something you do?
I don't necessarily put it on my calendar, but I keep it in my brain of, this
Mm.
is my rest day. Like, I
Got it.
could if I wanted to, but like, I know this is my rest day. I don't want anything to sort of come, disturb that.
Yeah.
Sometimes, stuff comes up, and then because that happens too. Like, if I'm like, okay, this chunk of time or this day is my rest day, I don't want to have to do anything. Obviously, sometimes stuff happens and you have to deal with it. But I feel like if stuff happens during my rest day and I don't get the rest that I need, it usually takes me like an additional 2 days of rest to
Oh,
make up for
wow.
it,
Mhm.
because I'm like, okay, I pushed myself to the limit. Then I had to go even further to do whatever it is I needed to get done. And now I'm really exhausted.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, so that has happened when when working, where it's like if I've had too much going on and like I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I physically cannot do anything today. So it's like if
Yeah.
I don't, because I know if I don't schedule the rest, my body will schedule it for me, and it's not going to be
Yes.
when I want it. It's just going to be, guess what? You don't work today.
Yeah.
No part of you is working. Like physically, it doesn't work. So that helps me prevent burnout
Mhm.
as much as I can, because I mean, it depends on what's going on, but if I can, again, if I could schedule that time of like, okay, everybody, just be alone. Let me
Mhm.
recharge my batteries, please.
Yeah.
Then I'm usually okay after that.
Yeah. And is that something that, like, does this include times with friends and family and kind of, social interactions? Does that
To
ever
some,
come into?
yeah, sometimes. So like, I think it depends on what the social interactions are, though, because
Mm.
if it's something like I do a lot of board gaming. Um,
Oh.
And so that is a very specific kind of social interaction where I know I still need to be, conscious and and alert, and like my brain is still going to be working,
Yeah.
versus a small gathering, or like, like you and I've had tea together. We're just kind of
Yeah.
like sat down and shot the shit, and like that for me is not a that is a relaxing thing. That's not a
Mm.
stressful um thing. But if it's something like an event, like an industry event where I know I'm going to be networking, or
Yeah.
like talking to a lot of people I don't know, that will require an additional amount of energy that I may or may not have. So it really depends on, yeah, what it is. Or even if it's like a big party, but like I know I'm going to know everybody there.
Mhm.
That is not as like that that is more energizing than energy using, and
Yeah.
so that I would count as, relaxing. But if we're like, my boyfriend and I also play video games together, so something like that where we like I go over to his and we play Diablo uh for a while, and like watch our Lakers game, like that's like, okay, that's a pajama date. That's not like the
Yeah.
same as going out and dressing up and like, don't trip on my heels kind of thing. Like I have to
Yeah.
um that's different. So it just depends on what it is. But yeah, sometimes I feel like I need that as my relaxing activity. Like I do want the social interaction, and I do want to like, I also just like to see what other people are up to and how they're doing and
Yeah.
everything. Um it just depends on what kind of energy do I need to expend, and how much do I have.
Definitely. Well, I want to go back to animation.
Sure.
Well, knowing that animation is our full-time job, in what ways has
Hmm.
animation helped you thrive?
Oh, that's a good question. Um Ooh, in what ways of animation? Well, it's helped me. I mean, I'm doing what I wanted to do when I was little.
Mm.
There really isn't anything better than that, right? It
Oh.
took me much longer than I thought it would. And I'm
Mhm.
not exactly where I want to be. Like I want to, there's definitely other things career wise I want to achieve. Um, but I basically made it. And that in and of itself has given me a sense of confidence and pride, and um honestly self-love almost. Like, yeah, I
Mm.
fucking did it. Like, it's
Yeah.
again, it's not it's I think, and then not in a conceited way.
Mhm.
It's a like taking the time to be like, look, you did good, kid. You worked really hard, and it again took longer than you thought, but you're doing what you wanted to do, and you're good at it, and people know that you're good at it, and appreciate the work that you put in and the things that you do, and
Yeah.
that in itself has intrinsic value, I think. And nobody can take that away from me, like, well, I'm sure we'll talk about AI later, but nobody can take away my knowledge and my skills and my strengths, and knowing, and I
Yeah.
tell this to students too, of like knowing what your strengths are, and accenting those strengths and building those strengths, as well as working on your weaknesses, is really important, because it's your strengths are the things that you like to do and are naturally um, good at anyway. So,
Mm,
if you're being known for your strengths, then that's a good thing.
yeah,
I don't know if I answered your
definitely.
question or not.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's a great answer to how animation helps you thrive. I think there's this common misconception with art where you need to suffer to make it great, and that
Mhm.
philosophy has greatly seeped into our industry.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that, and what's your take on it?
Um, I think it helps, but it's not. It shouldn't be the only thing that pushes you forward. Um, well, because here's the thing. Like, I thought a lot about this in terms of drama, right? Like, stories are all about drama, and drama is all about struggle. Nobody. I always think that, like, heaven is probably a really boring place because there's never any conflicts. It's like, I'm sure it's very nice, but there's nothing ever going on there.
Yeah,
Um, so which is why all of our stories are conflict based, and so struggling, I think, helps you appreciate it. Um, Being bad at something helps you appreciate it when somebody else is good at it, and when you have developed the skills enough to be good at it.
mm,
So if everything was just handed to you and there was no struggle, I think there's a little bit of a lack of appreciation for whatever it is you're doing. Like, if you're being handed everything, you have no appreciation for it, right?
yeah,
Because it's always been there. It's not a big deal. But if you've worked really hard and you know what that struggle is, compassion is built on acknowledging somebody else's struggle. So
mm,
if you don't acknowledge somebody else's struggle, you are like, well, what's the big deal? Like, what the heck? Like, why are you homeless? Like, what's wrong with you? Versus, oh yeah, I know what it's like to be out of work for X amount of time and worry about being ending up on the street. So from an artist point of view, it's and um, you don't necessarily struggling helps you feel the emotions that are necessary to be compassionate. And art is all about understanding other people's struggles and other people's stories. And so if you yourself have never struggled, like, it's also like, if you know the story of the Buddha, like, and I'm not a Buddhist, but the Buddha did not realize what humanity was until he suffered. um so, like, his whole life he was, treated, he was a prince, he was given everything he ever wanted by his family, who did not want him to suffer. And he was like, well, I have no meaning in my life now. So it's like, not that suffering gives you meaning, but suffering helps you understand yourself and the world around you, because struggle is what connects us all.
yeah,
And anybody who doesn't struggle tends to have that lack of compassion, because
yeah.
they never had to do that. So what the hell is wrong with everybody else? Um,
Mm.
and that falls into art too. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't think you need to be suffering in order to make good art. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying having at least some kind of sense of struggle helps you to identify with other people who are also struggling, and art as a microphone for, I guess, that struggle, um,
yeah.
helps us identify with that art.
I think there's a middle point, or, in the spectrum of everything with this argument. Yes, there is a healthy amount of suffering to get to where you are, to become a great artist, to have that compassion. But
Hmm.
I'm also thinking of the productions where it's so grueling, or so,
Oh yeah.
they rewrite all the time, but then for some reason, like, either executives or even audience will be like, well, the production was so crappy, but it was necessary to make this amazing product. And I
Yeah, I don't
think,
believe that's true at all.
yeah, yeah. And that's where it's
Yeah.
like, I like what you said of, yes, there is a certain amount of struggle to be pushing yourself to become better, to, again, have compassion for others, but
Mhm.
there is this bad it's like going to that other spectrum of suffering where it's like, well, it's unnecessary that you need to suffer that much in order to, like, make
Yes.
something great.
Yeah, for sure. When it comes to productions, there's no reason for that level of suffering, or there really isn't, in my opinion. Because I've been on shows where, yeah, the production struggled. It was really bad, and I've been on productions that were amazing. And people tended to work better and work harder when they felt supported, when they felt like
Mm,
they were part of the team, when they felt like their opinions were being heard and respected, when they felt their work was being recognized and respected. That's when the best work happens. So
yeah.
the idea of, and I don't know where it comes from, if it clearly comes like from top down, but the idea of like, oh, we have to make life terrible for the artists because that's how they work and that's how they operate. It's like, that's garbage.
Mhm.
If you make us happy, we will work so much harder. And like, I know there was an interview with Brad Bird ages ago of I think when he said this regarding when he was the director on the Iron Giant. If
Mm,
you if you have a production with high morale, you will get $5 of worth out of every dollar you spend. If you have, and I'm just paraphrasing, if
yeah.
you have a show with low morale, you're lucky to get 10 cents out of every dollar because people are
Oh,
not going
wow.
to want to work on their stuff. They're not going to put their best effort forward because they don't want to be there. They don't want to, they don't want to put all this energy towards something they don't give a shit about and they don't feel appreciated for. And
Yeah.
I've been on shows again, like as a director, where it's like the show was of varying quality, but I made sure that the morale on the show was high, regardless of what was
Mm,
happening, because I just wanted a happy team, even though we're working on stuff that's difficult. But I wanted them to know I had their back, that I cared about them as people, that I did not want them to overwork themselves, regardless
mm,
of whether it was a union show or not. I'm like, you guys are doing 40 hours. I can do I can do more than that because I'm getting paid more than you and that's my job, but I don't want you guys to overwork yourselves.
yeah.
Um, that makes a huge difference. There's no reason why, to purposefully, especially purposefully, make your team miserable because you think that will get better work out of them, because it doesn't, and that's been proven over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So yeah, that other side of the spectrum, like, completely is complete BS. For sure. Not true. And the thing is, it's funny. So like, I learned a lot of my managerial skills both from working with my mom at McDonald's, which is probably
Mm.
where I learned how to deal with people, is working the
Mhm.
drive-through during like the
Oh,
the
interesting.
summer three-day weekends where it's like 90 degrees with 100% humidity and people are throwing things through the drive-through window. That's a whole
Oh
nother
my
story.
gosh.
But it's like, that's how I deal with people, and or learned how to deal with people. And she and still is very much about people. Like, she's the person who her bosses call in whenever a store is having a problem, because she knows how to go in, and she's like, 90% of the time it's management. 90% of the time it's the managers not respecting the other workers and treating them like human beings. And once those managers are either gone or retrained, everything seems to magically fall into place.
Yeah.
So I took that, and then I've had other really, again, really, really good bosses and good
Mhm.
directors and supervising directors and everything that I've learned from, and also ones that weren't so great that I knew, okay, I'm not doing that. Definitely not doing that. Um, no, I can't read your mind. I'm sorry. Um, uh, so it's like you just learn a little bit from everybody
Yeah.
that you come across. But yeah,
Oh
don't
my
make your
gosh.
artist miserable. That's not the way to go. There's still people, goddamn. They want to be
Yeah,
happy and go home and play video games too, or whatever. Make their own art.
definitely. And I think, I wanna touch on it briefly, but I think
Mhm.
it's a big point that you talk about with management,
Mhm.
like how, because I have the same philosophy of I'd rather put the work on myself than rather have my workers overexert themselves and, work the 180 hours or whatever. But how do you handle for yourself management where you have to put more work on yourself?
Yeah. So I try to delegate as much as I can.
Mm,
And in a way, not that it's like, okay, now everybody else can do the work and I'm just going to sit here and collect a check. It's more like, do I need to do this task or can I give this to somebody who I know has a lighter burden, who would probably be better at this than me anyway? Or is this something that I have to do myself? So,
mm,
in particular, again, like when I'm doing retakes, if there's say there's something that needs to be reorganized in on the server, can I give that to a PA? Can I give that to a coordinator? Can I give that, I don't necessarily have to do that. Um,
yeah.
if it's something like on my last job, I actually was able to hire additional people, and I hired because there was no supervising director above me. I promoted one of my animators who had retake director experience to be my assistant retake director. And so I gave
Mm,
her certain duties that I knew was causing a bottleneck on my end so that I
yeah.
can concentrate on other stuff that was like higher level stuff that I knew I had to take care of. And so she became like first level QC, where before I saw the shots, she would look through it and give notes and make tweaks and stuff, so that by the time it got to me, there might be a few notes here and there, but for the most part I'm just looking to make sure it could air or not, and if it
Yeah.
couldn't, then I would kick it back. But having that extra step helped a lot because it took a lot off of my plate, because that was the main bottleneck. Whenever I'm doing retakes, I have to look at every single shot multiple
Mhm.
times. And if it's a 22-minute show, that's going to take me hours, because I don't just watch them all the way through. I have to watch each individual one out of context. So I have to look at the shot before and the shot after and any shots that might otherwise hook up to that shot. And
Yeah.
so it takes a while. It takes a long time, and hence the 84 hours almost. And I'm also in edits. I'm talking with,
Mm, mhm.
if there is a supervising director, I'm talking with supervising director. I'm talking with coordinators. I'm talking with producers and showrunners and all this other stuff. And so it's like, if I'm in an edit for 4.5 hours,
Yeah.
that's half my day. I can't start my the rest of my I can't look at anything until after that's over.
Yeah.
So delegating is huge, and again, delegating to a point to and communicating. Definitely, communication has been huge. Where I actually took a page out of your book from Tuka and Birdie, and I did um, uh, every other day I did a
Mm,
meeting at 10:30. So Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays, I did just a little short check-in meeting. Sometimes they were mandatory, sometimes they were optional. If we were on a crunch and I'm like, you know what, y'all know what to
yeah.
do, just go. Then I didn't make everybody go. But those check-in meetings were really important because those and they were we try to keep them short, but they were combination of, because everybody was working remotely still.
Mhm.
So there were a combination of that water cooler talk and just just making sure that everybody was on the same page with everything, just giving everybody the same information. And if anybody had any questions or stuff that was coming up a lot, that everybody would know at the same time. And
Yeah.
so that helped a lot too. Just making sure that they knew that the communication was open, but not so much that it would eat into too much of their time.
Yeah.
Um,
Which
it
I'm
was
like,
it was kind of a delicate balance.
wow, looks like I did
Yeah.
something good.
You're fantastic. Yeah.
No, that's
Yeah,
really
it was
cool to
good.
hear. Like, I like, because obviously I've taken that from someone as well. So it's nice
Sure.
to hear that start spreading rather than, because it is super
Dying on the vine.
important. Yeah. Because it is so
Mhm.
important to check in with your team, especially with the remote working. Like, a lot of times you
Mhm.
find out that somebody doesn't, if you're not checking in with someone, they're going to stay silent. they're not going to reach out to you
Yeah.
as often. Like, you have to be the one to open the what is it? You need
Floodgates.
to the what?
Floodgates.
Yes, you need to open the floodgates. You need
Yeah.
to, like, make the space for them to be able to be like, "Oh, yeah, I do
Hmm.
have a question about this. I do, like, have a concern. I do have something in my schedule that will interrupt, my workflow."
Hmm.
Like, so I'm really glad to hear that that's actually really helped you in your future productions, so
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, it was
it's
really important.
crazy how I'll hear, like, other animators or not even animators, just other people in general where they're on productions where they're like, "Nobody checks in with me. I'm just off in my
Hmm.
own island." Like, literally not even a weekly check-in. They're just like, "I don't know what's going
Yeah.
on. I'm just turning in my work
Yeah.
and they tell me if it's good." And it's kind of disheartening in a sense. Like, I know there's some people that work well like that, being like, "I don't need to be checked in on,"
Hmm. I'm just
but
gonna sit down and put my nose to the grindstone and just do it.
yeah. But
Yeah.
it's the morale thing too, like, they get demotivated because 'cause they're like, "What am I doing? I'm lost. I don't even
Yeah.
know what's going
I'm
on
s-
with the team."
I'm sending files into the void and I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
that was the thing. When we first went to work from home, I was in the middle of a production at the time. And so the
Mhm,
way that my supervising director for that production made sure that we were all connected is we had a very vibrant Google chat. And so she would check in with people and like we would say hello, good morning every morning and just like, sending each other memes or just shooting the shit or again, just like asking questions of, hey, I'm working on this thing. Is there a design for this? Like, or
mhm.
this seems like this design was updated. I think you could talk to the coordinator or whatever too. But having started the pandemic with that, I then went on to a different production within the same company where no one ever talked to each other and I was like thrown in the middle of the production. And I'm like, who do I talk to about who's on my team? Who am I working with? I don't even know. I don't even have a list
Mhm.
of names. I had nothing. So, and then I went back to that first team on a different project and I was like, oh God, thank goodness. Like, this is so much nicer. We actually talk to each other and know who each other are. And so when I was basically put in charge of my own team, I'm like, okay, you don't have to talk every day. That's fine. But
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we keep the communication flowing. And then, like me too, I had also talked with other animators who were similar in terms of no communication. And they're like, I feel like I'm getting no feedback. I have, there's one person who's like, I spent like 2 weeks where not a single person talked to me.
Oh my
I was
gosh.
like, what? How? No. They're like, no, they just emailed me my assignments and I did the assignments and I handed them in and that was it. I never heard
That's
anything
crazy.
after that. I'm like, that is awful.
Yeah.
Something I like to say is animation is a team sport built on an
Mhm.
assembly line. And so if there's no, if you're like cut off from everybody else on the assembly line, there's no teamwork and there's no like you can't do your job really like you
Mhm.
can't do it well anyway and so
Yeah.
it's like any so the productions that did I feel like the productions where people stayed happy they had at least some kind of communication going the ones where they had no communication even again for people who are very much introverted uh it still wasn't great to have zero communication you
Yeah,
know 'cause you still want
definitely.
feedback you still want to make sure you're doing well you know
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I'm having those tri-weekly meetings was like a good balance for me. And then if we needed an extra one for whatever reason, then I would schedule it, but then I might have the next one be optional.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
it's just like you have
And
to talk. And
yeah.
you have
Let's
to you
shift.
have to have chats.
Yes. Yes, chats are important. I think that's in any industry as well, like, not just
Hmm.
animation.
For sure. Keep the lines of communication open.
Mhm. So let's shift into teaching.
Okay.
You are, like, as I've mentioned, you are also teaching Toon Boom Harmony and I think figure drawing? Is that what you teach at the colleges or
No, so I usually it's Harmony. I also have taught Storyboard Pro.
Okay.
I've taught at Loyola. I've taught a bunch of different classes. I
Oh.
co-taught their um, thesis class 3 times, I think. That's always team taught. Um, and I did harmony a couple of times, and then the first class I taught there was their second year class. So the way that their program is set up is the first year you basically learn all the fundamentals on your own. The second
Mm.
year, first quarter, you work in teams to make a short film within 15 weeks. And so
Oh,
that
wow.
was the class that I had taught. And I had been brought in because the head of the department at the time thought that my second year film at UCLA was a really, really good example of a student film where it was
Oh.
short, it was like well crafted, it was, it was, it actually did really well at the festivals, which was like a whole other thing that I thought was really fun to do. And so they're like, okay, well, can you teach this class? Now, granted, this was before I worked in the industry, so part of me had, um, well, what is it? Uh, Imposter syndrome a little bit, but like I had done what they were doing, so it's like there wasn't completely imposter syndrome. I could do better now that I've actually
Mm.
been on professional productions, but at the time it was fine. They both teams got their work done, and both films were very strong, and I got a lot of feedback afterwards saying like these are some of the strongest films that have come out of this program, especially out of this class. So I was like,
Mm.
thank you. I made sure they got their shit done.
Yeah.
And that it was good. Like I wanted to make sure that it was strong too.
So, was it because of your film that got you into teaching, or?
Sort of. So like I said, I come from a family of teachers, and so my dad is a music teacher. His older sister, it who is now passed, my aunt Clarinda, she
Mm.
was a music teacher, and his younger sister Angela was a fourth grade teacher for a while, and then became a school principal who's now retired. And both of all of their parents were teachers. So my grandparents on that side were both teachers. And actually, it's a super cute story. They fell in love because they had hall monitor duty together and were chatting. And then my grandfather asked my
Cute.
grandmother for a date. So it's adorable. And they were married until my grandmother passed away in
Oh.
the late 90s. But and I'm yeah, anyway. Um, so yeah, long line of teachers, and so my aunt Clarinda, who's who's a music teacher, she had a music camp in the summertime. Um, so I went once as a camper as a kid. This is for fourth through eighth grade,
Mm.
and it's so she and my other aunt both lived in Phoenix. And so these are like inner city, what they call apartment kids, in Phoenix. Um, and they would take these kids for a week in the summertime up to the mountains in Prescott, Arizona. And so I went initially as a camper, and then as a junior counselor, and then as a counselor. So I started, and I was usually in charge of the baby violins because I've played violin since I was about 5. And
Mm-hmm.
so so I would help the other students, like the younger students, with their instruments. And we did choir, um, we did um, drama, so like short plays, and we did a whole bunch of stuff. We did
Oh
everything.
my gosh.
And it was like a night, it was a sleepaway camp. So like we were there for the
Mm.
entire week, packed in as much stuff as we could. There was a full band, full orchestra. Everybody had choir, handbells, like there's a bunch of stuff. So that's actually where I started teaching, is with her at that
Yeah.
camp
Mm-hmm.
from when I was again like 13, 14. And again, because I had really good teachers, and my you know my dad's a very good teacher. His parents were both very good. And I'm not just saying this because they were my family members. Like they were literally award winning
Oh, wow.
teachers. My aunt Clarinda was in the running for a teacher of the year at one point.
Oh.
And my aunt Angela, had her elementary school was rated A+ every single year that she was there. Um,
Dang.
so they're like I really learned from the best, which is great. And I feel very lucky about that. So I started basically when I was in high school, and then I also my brother, who's 8 years younger than me, he and his friends were interested in learning animation. So when I was in college, I taught them how to do stop motion. So
Wow.
there was always some kind of teaching involved in my life, and I'm the eldest of three, so of course,
Mhm.
and I'm the eldest on both sides of my family in my generation.
Oh my
So I
gosh.
had that older sister, eldest cousin, always the oldest person who would be more than happy to, and my all my siblings and I and our cousins, everything are really really close. So so just having that life experience of helping my siblings with
Mhm.
whatever they might need help with, whether it was homework or life stuff or whatever. And so it's like it came from a long history. It wasn't just because I had that one film. I'd
Yeah.
also done the summer program at UCLA before that. So I taught an animation class. I think it was like my second or third year at UCLA during the
Mhm.
summer for high school students. So I had some teaching on my resume before that. And then from there, I was recommended to teach through Studio Arts, and I taught harmony through Studio Arts, which is a company based sort of downtownish LA,
Mhm.
that um, is set up to train people in the entertainment industry in software
Mm.
mainly. So so I worked through there, and then through, and I don't know if you're going to ask me this, but I could just start talking about it. But that's how I actually got in. That's how I broke in,
Yeah.
was through Studio Arts. So I was hired by Studio Arts to train the animators at 6 Point Harness how to use Harmony. And again, this is before I actually did any studio work. I had done some freelance work, and I obviously had been teaching, and I had my own films and all that kind of stuff. Um, but I had initially learned Harmony back when it was called Toon Boom Studio when I was studying in England. um,
Mm.
so that's where I first learned it. And I had a couple of little projects that I worked on. And I also worked on a pilot that never went anywhere, um, that I'm now blanking on the name of, but it was, they, yeah, it was, I'm blanking on his last name. It'll come to me later. Doesn't matter. Didn't get made. Doesn't matter. But I worked on that, and I got hired specifically because I had to do the software. And this was
Yeah.
before it became really big.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so it was that time where, like at that time, kind of a couple of things aligned at the same time. So um, I was still trying to break in as a storyboard artist and was doing lots of board tests, but could never really break in. My grandfather had passed away and left me a little bit of money, and so I was able to pay off what little student loans I had, and also pay for retraining in Harmony. So I
Oh
could
wow.
buy the software and do. At the time, they had the way that they train people was like you would buy a bank of 40 hours, and they would just send. Like you would just do at the time a Skype call with one of their trainers, and you would just train with them one on one. And so
Yeah.
I did that, and and then I got that job teaching, training at 6 Point Harness, and so I retrained, which was the point where I realized I didn't really know the software very well at all. And
Oh my
there's a good thing that
gosh.
I retrained, because I didn't even know that. I had no idea what the node view was. I had no idea that you could do the puppeting thing. I would always just use it as traditional animation software. So I was like, oh,
Mhm.
well, I'm glad I did this. So I trained at 6 Point. So I did the training at 6 Point. I was there for, I think, like 2 weeks. And then 6 months later, I heard that 6 Point Harness was looking for harmony riggers. And so I
Mm.
contacted the producer who I had worked with when I was doing the training, and was like, hey, I heard that you're, looking for for riggers. And they're like, oh yeah, can you start Monday?
Oh my gosh.
It happened. It finally happened. And that was May 4. That was Star Wars Day of 2015. um, so I worked with them for about 3 months. Um, and at the time, it was like, oh yeah, you can basically stay here as long as there's work. Well, after 3 months, the work dried up, and Studio Arts called me back a few, like, right before I had gotten the notice that, hey, we're all going to be let go, to do some training at Bento Box.
Mm.
And And at the time I was like, well, I'm working for this basically rival studio. I probably can't do it. And then like, I think it was like that same day or maybe the day after we found out that we were getting let go. And so I called Studio Artist
Wow,
back and was like, guess what? I can do it now.
that's
And so
crazy.
it was a good thing because, yeah, and it's a good thing that that happened, like the timing happened that way. Um, because I've gone back to Bento Box several times.
Yeah.
So I went to Bento and I trained their designers how to use Harmony for Legends of Chamberlain Heights. And at the time they had not, I don't think they had hired any board artists yet, but they were looking. And so I was like, hey, do you mind? Like, I had a rapport with the supervising director because I was also helping him navigate Harmony because he had never used Harmony before, and they were using rigs.
Yeah.
By that point, I had worked for 3 months principally as a rigging artist at 6 Point, so I felt much more confident in my abilities as both an animator and as a rigging artist. And so I was helping him sort of wade through it and giving him advice, so like, oh, does this make sense? What about doing it this way? All that kind of thing. And so when I found out they were hiring for board artists, I asked if I could take the test. So I took the test, and then I got hired as a board revisionist, and that's how I got into boarding. Finally made it into boarding.
Wow.
So it was like such a roundabout backdoor, weird
Yeah.
way
I
to
haven't heard a
actually get
story
there.
like that. Yeah, I
Yeah,
haven't heard a story like that. That's so cool. It's like teaching has helped you
yeah,
and vice versa.
exactly. And
It's a cycle.
yeah, exactly. And the weird thing is that I forgot to mention this. Around the time I had retrained in Harmony, excuse me, I had actually given up trying to break in as board artist. I had
Mm,
taken a class that it basically expected us to work on our boards like 40 hours a week,
yeah.
but I was teaching, so I couldn't really do that. And so nobody in the class finished any of their boards.
Oh
And
my
that
god.
was kind of the last straw for me. I'm just like, okay, maybe this isn't for, I just need to step away from this. I can't do this anymore because I had submitted, so I was getting better, and I was, I had friends of mine, and I recommend this for anybody who is trying to break in and is struggling. I would take my storyboards and my storyboard tests to people who actually were working storyboard artists who I knew.
Mm,
And I would be like, I will buy you lunch if you don't mind going through my boards and telling me, like, just redline as much as you want. Just tell me what I can do to improve. And so
yeah.
I got better. I
Yeah.
definitely improved over time enough to be able to do that storyboard test for Legends well enough for them to hire me. And I'm sure part of it was like, oh, they're getting a twofer for me because I also can help them with Harmony stuff, which doesn't really bother me. That's fine. But I also did a pretty darn good test. Um, so I would, so having done that for years and years of like, yeah, I'm getting better, but not good enough to actually get hired. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm just going to concentrate on the Harmony thing. It's a big up and coming thing, and a lot of studios really want it, but not a lot of people know it. So I'm just going to kind of hang my hat on this for a little while. I basically found a void and was like, I'm going to fill that void.
Mm,
And that's where a lot of my reputation and experience came from. And so doing that for a really long time helped me, not just become a better animator, a better board artist, a better artist in general, but also helped me meet a lot of people and get to know them. And I was less. It was much easier to find work after that. Like once I finally got my foot in the door and started getting a reputation and people liked working with me, then it was a
yeah.
lot easier to find work after that.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, let's start getting towards the end.
Sure.
In the vein of funsies, is there a random animal fact you can tell me?
Oh shoot. I was gonna say only disgusting ones. I forgot about the random animal fact. I'm so sorry. Let me think.
And I should start
I
like I've been
know you
springing this
warned me.
up
I
on
just forgot.
everybody.
You no, you totally warned me, but I completely forgot, and I apologize. Oh man. Well, the one of the things that I was surprised, not this past time I went to the LA Zoo, but one of the earlier times I went. Um, it's like standing in the middle of foliage or whatever, and I hear this thing that sounds like a motorcycle, like a Harley revving. I'm like, what the hell is that? It was a koala. Koala bears
Oh my
sound
gosh.
like Harley Davidsons. They don't look it, but they do. And I wouldn't say it frightened me, but it surprised me and startled me for sure. I was like,
Yes.
what is that thing? It's like, oh, it's the cute little teddy bear sitting in the tree. That's what that is.
It's
So
funny
yeah.
because like I've never seen it in person, them doing that, but I've seen the videos of them demon
Yeah.
growling.
Demon God. No, I was there. Because I came around the corner and there he was like, I was like, oh, all right, that's you. Good job.
I love
Okay.
that.
Nobody mess with that guy. Yep.
So, as part of the show, I'd like to pull a tarot card because who knows, maybe you need to hear it today.
I probably do.
So, I'm just going to start shuffling and then
Okay.
you just let me know when to
When to
stop.
stop. Okay.
Hmm.
3, 2, 1. Okay. Hold on.
So, you got the Ace of Cups, but it was reversed.
Uh-oh. Okay. what,
Ooh.
what does that mean?
Let's
My cup
see.
is
Let's
empty.
see.
That's what it means.
And cups are like definitely emotional. Ooh. Okay. Yeah, it's like more of the spirit and emotions.
Okay.
And I'm just gonna double check because this description. Sometimes I'm like the description that came with the cards are. I'm always trying to figure out if I interpret it correctly.
Sure.
But the first words are revolution and change.
Okay. I'll take that. I feel like there is going to be we're on the precipice of a revolution in in the entertainment world right now. We're teetering on
Yes.
the edge of it, and we won't know what that looks like probably until this time next year at the earliest. That's my personal prediction. We'll see. I hope
Well,
I'm wrong.
so another thing also is that the reversed Ace of Cups, especially because, like, if it was upright, you see that there's like a sunrise coming out of the cup and
Hmm.
all these rays. It's like a giving. And I
Okay.
think with the reversed, it's more about giving to yourself. Because I
Yep.
think if it was reversed, it'd be faced towards you. So
Hmm.
make sure you practice some self love, maybe if you haven't, if you've been like quite busy, or, maybe if you haven't been looking in towards yourself. I don't know if that resonates at all.
Yeah, I think I've definitely. I mean, getting a little personal here. I have been a bit stressed out because of the state of the industry and you know, trying to find a new job. Did have an interview yesterday for a potential short film. So it's like going back to
Oh,
when I was doing short films. So there's an individual who wants to do like a short animated project, like an independent project. And I was like, okay, this
yeah.
might be fun to actually do something like going back to that. At
Yeah,
least until somebody else, yeah, until studio calls me and I can get
definitely.
my health insurance back.
Yeah, for real. This has been such a very rough time for us all. But yes, so just make sure you take care of yourself. And I feel like
I will
that's
do my
pretty,
best.
yeah.
Thanks,
Well,
Sam.
thank oh my God, of course. Thank you so much, Melissa, for being here and talking with me. Is there anything you want to promote about yourself? And is there somewhere you want people to find you?
Oh, well, for right now, they can find me on LinkedIn or Facebook. I do have an Instagram, but I almost never update it. But you can also reach me there. I mostly do lurking. I basically lurk on Instagram, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, I probably LinkedIn is the best place. So if you do want to message me, just let me know if you do message me that you heard me on this podcast, so I don't think you're a weird creeper and not respond.
Yeah.
I
And
try to
hopefully
respond to everybody.
And hopefully it's like an actual industry job that's saying, hey, we want to hire you on
That would be
a
nice.
full-time production.
Yeah, that would be amazing. But even if it's like I said, even if it's a smaller production that
Yeah.
needs somebody, because that's the thing, that one of the things I love doing is putting a team together, and especially now
Mm,
that everyone's looking for work, it's like, oh, I just want to put a team together that everybody can go back to work and then be able to
yeah,
work with awesome people again. But
definitely.
yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm
Yeah.
hoping it won't be too long. I don't know. I think it's going to be, like I said, I think it's going to be, this whole year is going to be rough for a lot of people. And
Yeah.
like I said, I hope I'm wrong, but that's what it's looking like. So we just have
I
to
know.
be be supportive of each other and
Hmm.
talk to each other, and like just make sure that nobody feels isolated. And if you do feel isolated, just reach out.
Yeah. And
Um,
also just like to make sure you're taking care of yourself as well. Because I know,
hmm
especially
for
when
sure.
you're out of a job, you feel like, oh, is there something wrong with me? I feel like a lot of self doubt
Yeah,
creeps in. But
yeah.
this is
You
just
feel like it's your
so huge.
responsibility. It's like all on
Yeah.
your
But just
shoulders, and it's
know,
like you can't you can't
yeah.
dictate what Zaslav does. Like
Yeah.
that has nothing to do with you. Don't
Truly.
worry about it. But yeah,
Hmm.
just do what you can while you can do it. In the meantime,
Hmm.
just like keep leveling up your skills. Like I'm still taking classes. I'm taking a class this weekend through the guild on character
Mm.
design because I know I'm a terrible designer. So that's gonna help me. That's my biggest weakness is design. Like I can recognize good design. I know when it works and when it doesn't, but I am not
Yeah.
necessarily a designer, so I always try to
But
beef up those skills whenever I can.
yep, leveling up, always leveling
Mm-hmm.
up.
Yep.
Well,
Exactly.
sadly, we are at the end. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow or subscribe. You can also follow Tired and Thriving on Instagram at Tired and Thriving, all one word. There you can reach out, give feedback, or maybe let me know how you've been uniquely thriving. You can also reach out through email at tiredandthriving@gmail.com. Thank you again, and I hope you'll have a thriving week. See you next time.